debate with John Curtis?
You know, I felt good about it. I think I was able to get some of our differences. I think last year we had a hard time separating ourselves. John ran so much as a conservative, and it's my hope that people got to see the differences.
This could have ended at the convention, right? I mean, but here you are, debating him again. So, where does that put you? How does that affect the race?
It's no secret that I'm a big fan of the convention process, or the caucus process. I spent $5,000 to get to this point right here, where John spent $130,000. And so, I think for me, I'm grateful for that system that allowed me to get to this place right now. But the goal is to get out, but it'll really be the next 5 weeks that will determine who's going to win.
What's the biggest difference that voters saw today between you and Congressman?
Well, I was happy that John did finally admit some of his things, that he's not conservative. He's not conservative on the Second Amendment, or Medicaid expansion, which, we have a problem. Our debt, our national debt, is a major problem. And so there was a number of issues along the way that I think there is a substantial difference.
What would you label him? That seemed to be an area of friction between the two of you. Is he a conservative or no?
No, well, I mean, John, my first race when I ran with John, he switched from being a Democrat to a Republican 3 days before my first race with him. And so I think you can start to see some of that difference. He was the Utah County chair of the Democratic Party, and so he's not a conservative. This is one of the most conservative districts in the state. And I believe that this district deserves to be represented by a conservative.
And yet, overwhelmingly, this district chose him.
No, he didn't get a majority. Tanner Ainge ran as a conservative and ran a very good race. We were actually quite surprised at. So Tanner and I split the conservative vote. I think as long as John is honest with who he is and runs as a moderate, this district, 47% of Utahns, according to Gallup poll, self-identify as conservative. And so I believe that there is. I'm a platform Republican. He's tried to, as sometimes he's done in the past, tries to make me extreme, but my views are right in line with the Republican platform. You look at, and I supported President Trump. I voted for him. And so I think that the state of Utah now is warming up to President Trump. He's done what he said he was going to do. And so I'm glad that I can hang that I actually spoke at a Trump rally the night before the election. And I can do that. John did not.
But the convention caucus system, which traditionally favors more conservative candidates, you managed to get to this point by just 12 votes. Why did that group, which arguably is the most conservative group of voters in this whole process, not overwhelmingly choose you?
Well, I mean, I didn't know I was running until the day of. I thought another conservative would step in, but and if had they, I would have supported them. That didn't happen, so I got started on the last day of sign up, and I had to arrange my work schedule, and so I didn't really even get in the race for 2 weeks after that. Again, I spent $5,000 to John's $133, plus he spent another $70,000 or so gathering signatures, and that's a difference in our philosophies. I live my life like a conservative, where John, you go and look at his filings and stuff. He spent a lot of money on consulting and PR, and John is very good at the PR. I have to admit, probably my weakness is I'm a policy guy. I like good policy, and not as good as the PR. But I think once people start to see that, then they'll vote for the person that is conservative, that has been conservative since he was first elected as a delegate at the age of 18.
You said that this is a conservative district. Will this primary then, do you think, decide whether or not what kind of conservatism this district is, whether it's your brand of conservatism or his brand? Because there are a lot of conservatives who say that they are conservative, but maybe they don't want to go where they see the party going.
It may, but I'm also very concerned that I think this seat is in jeopardy, because you look at the way that John Curtis handled the police firing and the sexual harassment, and that is a major concern. There's a Democratic representative in Connecticut that was pushed out by the Democrats and the Republicans. The Democrats are going to use that against John, and that was for one person that had been sexually harassed. There's a lawsuit with Provo with 5 women, and if you read the report, it is very troubling. And for me, I'm afraid that this seat is in jeopardy, that a Democrat or somebody in the United Utah Party could actually win that, because they've remained silent. But as soon as this, if John wins this primary, it's going to be a big thing in the news, and they will push that. And like I said, we already have record of a Democratic congresswoman being pushed out because she didn't handle it very well. And
But will that primary decide what kind of conservatism District 3 is?
well, if but I don't. At that point, I don't think that will be the focus. Again, the best thing for me is I've been outspent, is to get my message out. And, I grew up here. I'm in the house that I grew up where I was first elected as a delegate. And, people know my stances, but I was actually surprised that not everybody did. And so I think as people get to know me, that they'll be willing to support me.
Do you believe that the situation was mishandled in Provo?
Oh, it was terribly mishandled. And unfortunately, that was not the only incident. Last year, one of John's former partners went to the Deseret News and KSL and talked about many of the things that John had said in his campaign were not the way that they were. But the Deseret News and KSL buried the story. The reporter wanted to run it, and they didn't. Having talked about the sexual harassment that had happened at John's previous business, been talked about, that would have affected the election. And they still haven't brought it off after what's happened in Provo, where we see that it's a pattern of behavior. That's a big issue. And that's one of the beefs that I have, is that people in this state, that the media, if you want to talk about fake media, that sometimes they choose, the Deseret News endorsed John. So of course after that, they don't want to be embarrassed.
Deseret News does not endorse candidates,
Okay.
never has, owned by the LDS Church. We do not
Endorse,
endorse
okay.
candidates. And let's go back to that issue. Why did you not raise that issue as a candidate if it was such an important issue in your mind? Because
I was in the midst of the campaign. I had his former partner came to me and said that, and I passed it on, and then they passed it on to Deseret News. And we thought that they would take care of it, but they
why
did.
bring it up as a candidate if it's
Well,
important?
this is the problem, because John made a big deal about last year about the outside money and the negative campaigning. And so at some point you expect the press to do their job. And so when they have knowledge of that and they hide things, that's a problem, I think. And that's the same thing that's happened with President Trump. You look at President Trump, 9 out of 10 stories are negative. I do. I have a big beef with the Deseret, or with the Salt Lake Tribune right now, with the character assassination that they have done on Dr. Ron Mortensen. Here is a guy that I have known for over a decade, and I know him. And yet, when they can't win an argument, they immediately go after character assassinations. And so the media in its job, I would go to say, so far to say that occasionally there is fake news. And you can be fake news when you don't cover the stories that should be covered.
Today, Representative Curtis said, when asked about Dr. Mortensen, he said, there's no way that this congressman will ever vote for a racist to fill that position. He doesn't get a vote, but did you take that as him calling?
Yeah, no, he's calling, and that's the problem. Here, it was interesting last year at one of my campaign events when we had a booth on the 4th of July. People that have called me all sorts of names, and there's people actually, there's newspapers in this organization that have called me certain. But I looked around, and I was the only non-native born in my group. I had somebody from Venezuela, somebody from Nicaragua. The socialists ruined their country. I had somebody from Mexico. I had somebody from Ethiopia and Ukraine. And yet I've been called names simply because I believe in immigration, but I am very strongly against illegal immigration. And it's the same thing with Dr. Mortensen. They have attacked him because he is for legal immigration, but he is against illegal immigration. The press hasn't done its job as far as talking about the harm. The many victims, I've had dozens, or actually hundreds of legal immigrants come up to me and say, hey, Chris, thank you. We're trying to bring our family, but nobody talks about them. Nobody tells their story. Nobody talks about the $100 million that we're spending at hundreds of millions of dollars at Utah Valley University for charity care for illegal aliens, and what that's doing to middle-class Americans. President Trump has done. Ron Mortensen has talked about that. And rather than going after his research, for example, when he talked about the 60,000 children in the state of Utah that have stolen identities, they criticize his character. It's the very same thing for me. I believe in immigrants. I have friends from all around the world. But whenever somebody's critical of it, they immediately start with the race card. That's the absolute worst thing that you can call somebody in today's vernacular. And I will always defend those people that are being attacked unfairly. because it's a much different perspective. For me, I see it from the world. If you want to talk about the definition of institutional racism, it's when one country, which makes up 2% of the world's population, is getting 28% of the benefit of legal immigration, 50% of the benefit of illegal immigration, and 79% of DACA students. That is racist. But I don't start my conversations with you that might have a different opinion by calling you racist. But many people do the exact same thing to the people on my side, to President Trump, to me, and Dr. Mortensen.
One more question.
Thank you.
Thank you.